The insistent buzz of the alarm yanked me from sleep, a jarring start to another perfectly predictable Tuesday. 6:30 a.m. Ugh, I slapped the snooze button, a reflex honed over years of soul-crushing mornings. Another day in the beige cubicle farm, another day of wrestling with spreadsheets that seemed to multiply in the dark corners of my computer. My life? Let's just say it's a masterclass in the mundane. Shower, shave, the absolute minimum, because who has time? Lukewarm coffee inhaled standing up, and a granola bar scavenged from the back of the cupboard. Breakfast of champions, right? I glanced at my phone while I choked down the granola bar, just to get my daily dose of impending doom from the news. Apparently, the world is still teetering on the brink. Fantastic. My apartment, it's fine, functional, cleanish, but it feels empty even when I'm in it. Kind of like my life, I guess. I pull on my tie navy blue, just like all the others. My wardrobe is basically a study in gray and navy. Looking in the mirror, I see, well, me, Mark. Average guy, brown hair, brown eyes, those little lines around my eyes that I pretend aren't there. Just another cog in the corporate machine. The office is exactly as I left it, a maze of identical cubicles filled with the low hum of computers and the muffled sound of phone calls. I navigated on autopilot, nodding to people I barely know, exchanging those, "How's it going?" that everyone knows are just a formality. Nobody actually cares how you're doing. It's just part of the dance. My desk is a disaster zone, a mountain of files and reports that threatens to avalanche at any moment. I sit down, fire up the computer, and stare at the blinking cursor. Seriously, is this it? Is this the grand culmination of all my hopes and dreams, quarterly projections, and TPS reports? It's a depressing thought. I used to have stuff I wanted to do, big dreams, you know? Like actually travel the world, maybe write a novel, learn to play the guitar. But somewhere between high school and now, they kind of fizzled out, replaced by this comfortable, numb routine. My life is like a well-worn pair of jeans, comfy, sure, but also kind of faded and boring. The only thing I really look forward to is poker night. Every Friday, me, Dave, Mike, and Chris get together at Dave's place. Pizza, beer, bad jokes, and even worse, poker faces. It's a few hours of sanity, a chance to actually relax and feel like a human for a bit. It's the only spark in my week. And then there's Sarah. Sarah, my girlfriend, since forever. 7 years. That's practically a lifetime in relationship years, right? We've been together since high school. First awkward kisses, graduation, the whole shebang. She's my best friend, the person I tell everything to. Or at least she used to be. Lately, things have felt off. She's been distant, like her mind is a million miles away. Her laugh sounds forced. Her smiles don't quite reach her eyes anymore. I keep telling myself it's just work stress, but I'm not so sure. She's been working late a lot, coming home exhausted, barely saying a word. We used to talk for hours, about everything and nothing. Now, we're lucky if we get more than a few grunted sentences out of each other. It's like we're living in the same apartment, but in completely different worlds. I love her, I really do. But sometimes I wonder if we're just together because it's easy, because it's what we know. We've got our routine down pat, Italian restaurant every other Saturday, movie night on Sundays, the occasional weekend trip. Perfectly nice, perfectly predictable, perfectly blah. And that's what's bugging me. It's not that I'm unhappy, exactly. It's more like I'm numb, going through the motions, like I'm watching my life from the outside, instead of actually living it. I've been thinking about proposing, taking things to the next level. But lately, I just don't know. Is it the right thing? Is it what she wants? Or is it just me trying to cling to something familiar, something safe? Because the idea of being alone terrifies me. I bought the ring. A simple diamond solitaire, classic and elegant. I figured it was safe. She always liked simple things. I planned a special dinner at our favorite Italian place. I was nervous, more nervous than I'd been in years. I imagined her face lighting up, the tears of joy, the enthusiastic yes. I even practiced my little speech in the mirror, trying to sound confident and romantic, not like a bumbling idiot. The dinner started off okay. We made small talk, the kind of polite conversation you have with someone you've known for years, but don't really know anymore. There was a distance between us, a quiet tension that I couldn't quite place. When the waiter brought the ring nestled in a small velvet box, my heart pounded in my chest. I took a deep breath, got down on one knee, and launched into my carefully rehearsed speech. But as I spoke, I saw the look on her face. It wasn't joy. It wasn't surprise. It was discomfort, dread, almost. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, she took a deep breath and said, "Mark, I can't." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my stomach drop, my ears start to ring. "What? What do you mean?" I stammered. She explained, her voice gentle but firm. She said she felt trapped, suffocated by the routine. She said she needed a break, a chance to explore herself, to figure out who she was outside of our relationship. She said she'd only ever been with me since high school, and she needed to experience other things, other people, to know for sure if this was what she wanted. The words were like tiny daggers piercing my heart. I felt numb, confused, betrayed. She was leaving me. After 7 years, she was just leaving. Sarah moved out the next day. The apartment felt cavernous, empty, echoing with the silence of her absence. I wandered around, touching her things, her favorite mug, her worn-out sweater, the framed photo of us from our high school graduation. Each object was a reminder of what I'd lost. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the couch staring at the wall, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. I tried to call Dave, to tell him what happened, but I couldn't even get the words out. I just hung up, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The poker night stopped. I couldn't face my friends, couldn't pretend that everything was okay. The thought of sitting around a table, laughing and joking felt unbearable. Everything felt unbearable. I went to work, but I was a zombie going through the motions, barely registering what anyone was saying. My boss gave me a concerned look, asked if I was okay. I just shrugged and mumbled something about being tired. I started having nightmares. Dreams of Sarah, of the ring, of the look on her face when she rejected me. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me like a weight. I was lost, adrift in a sea of grief and confusion. I didn't understand how things could have changed so drastically, so quickly. How could she just leave? How could she throw away 7 years, just like that? I felt like a part of me had died. I was a shell of a person, hollowed out, empty. I didn't know what to do, where to turn. I just wanted the pain to stop. The pain was a constant, a dull ache in my chest that never seemed to go away. It was a physical pain, a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. But it was also something more than that. A deep, hollow emptiness that had taken root in my soul. I went through the motions of daily life, but I felt disconnected, like I was watching myself from a distance. The world seemed muted, gray, devoid of color. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, replaying the scene with Sarah over and over again. Her words echoed in my head. I can't. I need a break. I need to explore myself. They were like a broken record, playing on repeat, each repetition twisting the knife a little deeper. I tried to talk to Dave, to explain what had happened, but the words just wouldn't come. I'd start to speak, then I'd choke up, tears welling in my eyes. I felt weak, pathetic. I was supposed to be the strong one, the guy who had it all together. But I was falling apart. I was a mess. The bridge loomed ahead, a cold, gray structure against the darkening sky. I walked towards it, my footsteps slow and deliberate. I wasn't thinking clearly. My mind was a swirling vortex of pain, despair, and confusion. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't want to die, not really, but I didn't want to live like this either, trapped in this endless cycle of grief and loneliness. I reached the railing, the cold metal biting into my skin. I looked down at the water below, the dark, swirling current. It looked cold, inviting. A way out. A way to make the pain stop. I climbed onto the railing, the wind whipping around me, the drops stretching out below. For a moment, I hesitated. A tiny voice in the back of my head whispered, "Don't do it." But the voice was weak, drowned out by the roar of despair in my ears. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and leaned forward. Halfway down, as I was falling, the cold air rushing past me, a sudden, sharp realization pierced through the fog of my despair. I don't want to die. The thought was so clear, so powerful, it stopped me in my tracks. Or rather, it almost stopped me. I braced myself for the impact, the icy water rushing up to meet me. And then, nothing. I was lying on the side of the riverbank, shivering, soaked to the bone, but alive. I sat up, my head throbbing, my body shaking. I looked around, confused. How? How was I still alive? I remembered falling, the terror, the sudden realization that I wanted to live. But after that, nothing. It was like a blank space, a gap in my memory. I stood up, my legs wobbly, and started to walk. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to escape the bridge, the river, the memory of what I almost did. As I walked, I noticed something strange. It was like I could hear people's thoughts. Not actual voices, but something else, a kind of knowing. I walked past a couple arguing, and I suddenly knew what they were thinking. The unspoken resentments, the hidden fears. It was unsettling, disturbing. I tried to block it out, to focus on my surroundings. But the thoughts kept intruding, a constant stream of noise in my head. I didn't understand what was happening. Was I going crazy? Was this some kind of side effect from what happened at the bridge? Dave called me later that day, his voice full of concern. He'd heard I'd been MIA, hadn't been at work, hadn't answered my calls. He insisted I come over for poker night. I almost refused. The thought of facing my friends, of pretending everything was okay, was unbearable. But Dave was persistent. He said he was worried about me, that he just wanted to see me. So I went. I didn't tell him about what happened at the bridge, about the thoughts. I just mumbled something about being sick. The poker night started off awkwardly. Everyone was tiptoeing around me, asking if I was okay. I just shrugged and tried to act normal. But then something happened. As we were playing, I started to hear their thoughts. Not just general impressions, but specific thoughts, their strategies, their tells, their bluffs. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain. I could see right through them. I knew what cards they were holding, what they were planning to do. At first I was terrified. I didn't understand what was happening. But then a different feeling started to creep in. Excitement. Possibility. I started to play, using the information I was getting from their thoughts. I won hand after hand. Not in an obvious way. I was careful to lose a few hands here and there just to avoid suspicion. But I was winning. And as I was winning, something inside me started to shift. The pain, the emptiness, the despair, it started to recede. For the first time since Sarah left, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was a new beginning. The poker chips felt cool and smooth beneath my fingertips. The familiar green felt of the table, the clatter of chips, the low murmur of conversation. It all felt strangely different, sharper somehow. Like my senses had been dialed up a notch. I glanced at Dave, his brow furrowed as he considered his hand. And then it happened. A thought, clear as day, echoed in my mind. I need to bluff. He's got nothing. It was Dave's thought. I knew it. I looked at his face, trying to discern any tell, any flicker of deception. But there was nothing. He was a good poker player, controlled, impassive. Without his thought, I would have folded. But I knew. I saw my own cards. A pair of sevens. Not great, but not terrible. I raised the bet. Whoa, someone's feeling confident, Mike chuckled, tossing a few chips into the pot. I could hear his thoughts too, a jumble of excitement and nervousness. He's bluffing. I can feel it. But what if he's not? He called. Chris folded, muttering something about having a weak hand. I looked at Dave again. He was staring at me, his eyes narrowed. He knows. He knows I'm bluffing. But how? He folded. I won the hand. It was a small pot, but the feeling was exhilarating. I wasn't just playing poker anymore. I was something else. The rest of the night was a blur. I didn't clean them out. I won some, lost some, played it cool. But with every hand, I was experimenting, testing the limits of this gift. I could hear their thoughts, their fears, their hopes. I could anticipate their moves, see through their bluffs. It was like having a cheat code for life. As I drove home, the adrenaline still pumping, I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. Not anymore. This was something bigger. Vegas, I said aloud, the word hanging in the air. It was crazy, impulsive, reckless, but it felt right. I went home, packed a bag, and barely slept. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office, a newfound sense of purpose fueling me. I quit, I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. He looked surprised, then concerned. Mark, are you sure? This is a big decision. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied, handing him my resignation letter. He tried to talk me out of it, but I was resolute. I couldn't explain it. I just knew I had to go. I had to escape the monotony, the routine, the ghost of Sarah. I had to find out what this power meant. The drive to Vegas was long and monotonous, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The desert landscape stretched out before me, vast and empty, mirroring the emptiness I'd felt inside for so long. But as I got closer to the city, the landscape began to change. The neon lights of Vegas shimmered on the horizon, a beacon of excitement and possibility. As I drove down the strip, the vibrant, chaotic energy of the city washed over me. It was a sensory overload, the flashing lights, the blaring music, the throngs of people. It was everything my old life wasn't. It was loud, brash, unapologetic. It was alive. I checked into a cheap motel off the strip, a far cry from the luxurious hotels I knew I'd be staying in soon. I wasn't here for the glitz and glamour. I was here for something else. Something more. I walked out onto the strip, the sheer scale of the casinos taking my breath away. It was a different world, a world where fortunes were won and lost in the blink of an eye. A world where I could thrive. I walked into the first casino I saw, a small, unassuming place with a few poker tables tucked away in the back. It was time to get to work. I sat down at a table, the familiar click of the chips a comforting sound. I looked around at the other players, their faces etched with hope and desperation. I could hear their thoughts, a cacophony of voices in my head. I need to win this hand. Please, let me get a good card. He's bluffing, I know it. I smiled. This was going to be interesting. The small, smoky poker room felt like a world away from the glitz and glamour of the strip. This was where I belonged. For now. The low-stakes games were perfect for honing my skills, learning to control the voice in my head. It wasn't just hearing thoughts anymore. It was more like understanding them. I could feel the emotions behind them, the fear, the greed, the desperation. It was a strange, unsettling feeling, but I was learning to manage it. I'd sit at a table, observing the other players, listening to their internal monologues, learning their tells, their patterns. I wasn't just winning. I was studying. I was becoming a student of human nature. Another raise? A guy with a handlebar mustache grumbled, pushing a stack of chips forward. I could hear his thoughts, a mix of bravado and doubt. He's got nothing. But what if he calls? I knew he had a weak hand. I'd seen it in his eyes, heard the flicker of uncertainty in his thoughts. I called his raise, my expression neutral. He bluffed, as I knew he would. I called again, and he folded, muttering something about bad luck. It wasn't luck. It was knowledge. I played it cool, winning consistently but not overwhelmingly. I didn't want to draw too much attention to myself. I was building my bankroll slowly and steadily, like a squirrel preparing for winter. But more importantly, I was building my confidence. I was no longer the timid, insecure guy who'd walked into the city a few days ago. I was becoming someone else. Someone stronger. As my winnings grew, so did my reputation. I started getting invitations to higher stakes games, the kind where the real money was on the table. The competition was tougher, the players more experienced, more cunning. But I had my secret weapon. I could hear their thoughts, anticipate their moves, see through their bluffs. I met all sorts of characters, seasoned pros with steely eyes and decades of experience, wealthy amateurs who thought money could buy them skill, and calculating sharks who would stop at nothing to win. Each one was a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. "You're having a good run," a woman with a sharp, intelligent face said to me one night, after I'd won a particularly large pot. She introduced herself as Isabella. "You've got a good read on the table." I shrugged, playing it coy. "Just lucky, I guess." She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Luck has nothing to do with it. You're different. I can see it." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She knew, or at least she suspected. We talked for a while about poker, about life, about everything and nothing. She was smart, insightful, and she didn't judge me. She just accepted me. A few weeks later, I received an invitation. Not just any invitation. The invitation. The Golden Nugget Poker Classic. A prestigious tournament with a multi-million-dollar prize pool. It was a chance to prove myself, to solidify my success, to show the world, and maybe even Sarah, what I was capable of. I felt a surge of excitement, mixed with a healthy dose of nervousness. This was the big leagues. This was where the sharks swam. But I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I'd come a long way from the timid, heartbroken guy who'd stumbled into Vegas a few weeks ago. I was no longer just Mark, the average accountant. I was something more. I was a poker player, a winner, and I was just getting started. The ballroom shimmered with anticipation. Hundreds of eyes were on the final table, the culmination of days of intense poker, the air thick with tension and the scent of high stakes. I sat at the table, my heart pounding in my chest, but my expression was calm, focused. This was it, the moment I'd been working towards, the Golden Nugget Poker Classic. Millions of dollars on the line. More than that, though, it was about something else. Validation. Proof. A symbol of my transformation. The cards were dealt, the chips shuffled, the game began. My opponents were a formidable bunch, seasoned pros, each with their own strategy, their own tells. But I had my edge. I could hear their thoughts, anticipate their moves, see through their bluffs. I wasn't just reading their faces, I was reading their minds. The first few hands were cautious, everyone feeling each other out. I played it cool, winning some, losing some, keeping a low profile. I didn't want to draw too much attention to myself too early. This was a marathon, not a sprint. As the game progressed, the tension mounted. The blinds got higher, the stakes got bigger, and the pressure intensified. I could feel the weight of the money, the weight of expectations. But I stayed focused, calm, determined. I used my power judiciously, not just to read minds, but to anticipate my opponent's moves, to understand their strategies, to exploit their weaknesses. I could hear their doubts, their fears, their desperation. He's got a strong hand. I should fold. Maybe if I raise, he'll back down. Please, just let me win this hand. I knew what they were going to do before they even did it. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned myself, when the pressure felt overwhelming. What if they figure it out? What if they realize I can hear their thoughts? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I couldn't afford to lose focus. I'd come too far. I'd sacrificed too much. I wasn't going to let fear get in my way. I was playing for more than just money. I was playing for myself. I was playing for a second chance. The final hand arrived. It was down to me and a seasoned pro named Jake, a grizzled veteran of countless poker tournaments. He was a tough opponent, experienced, calculating, and he wasn't giving anything away. But I could hear his thoughts. I've got a good hand. I can win this. He was confident, maybe even a little cocky. He raised the bet, pushing a stack of chips across the table. I looked at my cards, a pair of aces. Not the best hand, but not the worst. I could hear Jake's thoughts again. He's going to fold. He always folds when I raise like this. He was wrong. I wasn't going to fold. I knew he had a good hand, but I also knew he was overconfident. He thought he had me beat, but he was wrong. I raised the bet, pushing all my chips into the pot. He looked surprised, then confused. He's bluffing. He has to be. He called. He flipped over his cards, a pair of kings. A strong hand, but not strong enough. I showed my aces. The crowd erupted. I'd won. The moment the last card was dealt, a wave of emotion washed over me. Relief, joy, disbelief. I'd done it. I'd won. $5 million. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about something more. It was about validation. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of anything. That I was no longer the heartbroken, insecure man I once was. I'd transformed. I'd reinvented myself. I was a winner. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Media interviews, flashing cameras, congratulatory handshakes. Everyone wanted a piece of me. They wanted to know my story, how I'd done it. I smiled for the cameras, answered their questions, played the part of the humble winner. But inside, I felt detached. I'd achieved my goal, but it felt empty. The money was nice, of course, but it didn't fill the void inside me. I'd won the tournament, but I was starting to question what it all meant. Was this really what I wanted? Was this what I was looking for? Or was there something more? News travels fast, especially when it involves millions of dollars and a local boy made good. It wasn't long before the story of my Vegas triumph reached my hometown. My face was plastered all over the local news, my name mentioned in hushed whispers at the grocery store, my unexpected success the talk of the town. And of course, the news reached Sarah. I knew it would. I'd even imagined it, replaying the scenario in my head 1,000 times. But the reality was different, more complex than I'd anticipated. I could picture her reaction, a mix of surprise, disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of regret. She'd see me on TV, hear my name on the radio, read about my victory in the newspaper. She'd see the new me, confident, successful, a millionaire. The man she'd left behind, the heartbroken, insecure guy who'd begged her to stay, was gone, replaced by someone else. Someone she clearly hadn't seen coming. Someone she'd underestimated. A few days after the tournament, I received a text. Just one word. Vegas? It was Sarah. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What did I say? What could I say? I finally replied with a simple, yes. She arrived the next day. I met her in the lobby of my hotel, a swanky place I'd never have dreamed of staying in just a few weeks ago. She looked different, more polished, more sophisticated. But her eyes, they were the same, full of a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. Mark, she said, her voice tentative. Congratulations. I saw the tournament. Thanks, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We sat down in the hotel bar, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation providing a strange backdrop to our reunion. She told me about her life, her job, her new apartment. She talked about her journey of self-discovery, the experiences she'd craved, the independence she'd sought. It all sounded so familiar, like a script I'd once memorized but now felt no connection to. Then she got to the point. Mark, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I made a mistake. My stomach clenched. Here it was, the moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated. I was wrong, she continued, her eyes pleading. No one else compares to you. I realize that now. I miss you. I miss us. She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch sending a strange shiver down my spine. It wasn't the familiar comfort I remembered. It was something else, something I couldn't quite name. "I'm ready now," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ready to say yes to the proposal, to us. She was expecting the old Mark, the Mark who would have jumped at the chance, the Mark who would have forgiven her in an instant, the Mark who would have done anything to have her back. But that Mark was gone, replaced by someone different, someone stronger, someone who knew his own worth. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, no lingering love, just emptiness. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I appreciate you coming, but I can't." Her face fell, her eyes widening in shock. "What? What do you mean?" "I mean, it's over," I said, the words feeling strange and final as they left my lips. "I've moved on?" She stared at me, speechless, her eyes filled with disbelief. But, but, I thought you still loved me." "I did," I said, "once. But things change, Sarah. People change. I'm not the same man you left behind." She looked at me, searching my face for any sign of weakness, any hint of the old Mark. But he was gone. "I understand you needed to explore yourself," I continued, "to find out who you were. But I needed to do the same. And in doing so, I found out that we're not right for each other. Not anymore." She was silent for a long moment, her eyes glistening with tears. Then she stood up, her face a mask of hurt and confusion. I don't understand," she whispered, before turning and walking away. I watched her go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Sadness, perhaps, for what we'd lost, but also a sense of relief, freedom. I wasn't the same man she'd left behind. I'd changed, I'd grown, I'd discovered my own worth. And I knew, with a certainty that surprised even myself, that I'd made the right decision. It was over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Sarah walked away and I watched her go, a strange mix of, well, not much really. A little sadness maybe for what could have been, but mostly just relief. It was finally over. And I knew, deep down, that I'd made the right call. I poured myself a whiskey, the amber liquid catching the city lights outside my window. I swirled the glass, watching the ice clink, my mind replaying the conversation. I'd expected to feel something. Guilt, regret, a pang of the old feelings. But there was nothing. Just a quiet sense of closure. I told her the truth. I'd moved on. And it wasn't some act, some performance. It was real. I wasn't putting on a show for her or for myself. It was the honest truth of where I was now. I could still remember the way my heart used to leap at the sight of her, the way my world revolved around her smile. But those feelings, they were like faded photographs, ghosts of a past I no longer recognized. "So," I murmured to myself, taking a slow sip of the whiskey. "That's it then. Officially over." It felt strange to say the words aloud, to give voice to the finality of it all. Sarah, my Sarah, the girl I'd loved since we were awkward teenagers, was no longer a part of my life. And somehow, I was okay with that. More than okay, actually. I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't that I didn't care about her. I did, I always would. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend that things were the same, that we were the same. We'd both changed, grown in different directions. And sometimes, love just isn't enough. I remembered the way she'd looked at me, her eyes searching mine, desperate for a flicker of the old Mark, the one who would have forgiven her anything. But that Mark was gone. He'd been buried beneath the weight of her rejection, the pain of her absence. And in his place, something new had emerged. Something stronger, more resilient, someone who knew his own worth. "You look surprised," I'd said to her, my voice calm, almost detached. Did you really think I'd just be waiting for you? That I'd just pick up where we left off? She'd stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. But I thought you still loved me. I'd paused, taking a deep breath. I did, I'd admitted. Once. But things change, Sarah. People change. I'm not the same man you left behind. She'd looked at me, searching my face for any sign of weakness, any hint of the old Mark. But he was gone. I understand you needed to explore yourself, I'd continued, my voice steady, to find out who you were. But I needed to do the same. And in doing so, I found out that we're not right for each other. Not anymore. I sat down on the couch, the plush cushions a stark contrast to the hard reality of the past few weeks. My mind started to wander, replaying the whole crazy journey. The pain, the despair, the bridge, and then the gift. It still felt surreal, like some fever dream, the telepathy. It wasn't just hearing thoughts, it was understanding them, feeling the emotions behind them. Fear, greed, desperation. I could feel it all. It was unsettling at first, but I learned to manage it, to use it. It became my edge, my advantage. But it was more than that. It was a catalyst. It forced me to confront things I'd been avoiding for years, my insecurities, my weaknesses, my fears. And in facing them, I discovered something about myself. Something I hadn't known was there. I thought the power was the answer, the key to everything. I thought it would fix me, make me successful, make me happy. And in a way, it did. I escaped my old life, proved myself, achieved a level of success I never thought possible. I'm a millionaire now, a poker champion, a guy everyone wants to know. But sitting here in this fancy suite, the city lights twinkling below, I feel detached. I climbed the mountain, reached the top, and now I'm looking around, wondering, is this all there is? The telepathy, it was just a tool. It opened a door, but I had to walk through it myself. It forced me to look in the mirror, to see myself for who I really was. Not the guy defined by Sarah, by my boring job, by what other people thought of me. Just me, Mark. And that was terrifying at first, but it was also liberating. I'm not that heartbroken, insecure guy anymore. I'm different, stronger, more sure of myself. I chased success, thinking it would bring me happiness. But now, I'm starting to get it. It's not about the money, it's not about the fame, it's not about what other people think. It's about something deeper, something inside. I'm grateful for the chances I've been given, for the way things turned out. But I also know that true happiness isn't something you can buy. It's not in the thrill of winning or the applause of the crowd. It's about finding peace inside, accepting who you are, flaws and all, living a life that means something to you. And I'm just starting to figure out what that means. Vegas was supposed to be the answer, the place where I found myself. And in a way, it was, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't the money, it wasn't the winning, it was the journey. And I'm just beginning to understand where that journey is taking me.